presently in the Gambia, there's an ongoing debate when it comes to activism and journalism. So I just want to know what your take is on when a journalist is an activist at the same time. Is it ethical? And if it is ethical, what can one do to make it ethical, for instance, if it's not ethical? Because currently we have human rights activist Mahdi Jabate that has been arrested. And you can see journalists at the same time being activists and trying to play double roles, and it's a bit confusing. So what is your take on being an activist and a journalist at the same time?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's not an easy answer, I think, because I mean, I for example, I could not do that at the BBC. There's no place for that. However, there are many other press organs which are maybe newspapers owned by proprietors who lean to one direction or another, where there is more a sense of activism in the journalism. I mean, I think the bottom line is how evidence-based is the journalism, and we've seen over the generations. You know, you go back to the likes of Pilger, for example, very much an activist, but built on hard evidence journalism. So there is obviously a place for it, but if you are working within an environment as I do, which is in theory is impartial, and I think that's you know, we can come into issues of unconscious bias and what have you. They're all there. We know that. It's, you know, you have to work out how you would balance an activist perspective with another perspective.
It's pleased to talk to you, David. I understand how best, you know, journalists can sustain coverage of big crises. In this case, you're talking of COVID-19, and then you have got climate change. It's kind of tricky. You highlighted at some point that when we had this issue of coronavirus just coming into the fore, I think you had to adjust everything, make every bulletin be coronavirus sensitive and all that. So my question is, how best can we sustain coverage of these two intersecting crises so that we don't leave the other critical matter behind, but at the same time, we're also not ignoring the other?
Yeah. First things first, I love the jacket and the dicky bow. You look fantastic. Pictures are everything. Remember that. Look, seriously, I tell you one interesting thing that I found over the course of the last few months. When you reach sort of points of almost saturation on a story, I managed to set up 2 or 3 interviews with some lovely pictures with people involved in deep ocean discovery and 1 or 2 climate change issues. And I managed, I mean, I had to get editorial support for that from my editor, but I was able to get those into the bulletin as a way of breaking up almost the monotony of coronavirus. And oddly, on a normal day, those stories might not have got on, but because they had a bit of feature to them and some, to be honest, lovely pictures, we got them on and we highlighted them, and they were very well appreciated because they weren't coronavirus. So, you know, think creatively about, this would be a good time to change things. God, what are we going to do with all this coronavirus stuff? Well, people are out there are in exactly the same position. I don't want to hear it anymore. I want something else. So look at ways of breaking it up, perhaps with other issues, if you can find a good angle that just effectively, from a bulletin point of view, it sort of helps to freshen up a bulletin.
As we battle this COVID-19, this global pandemic, as journalists, we are exposed to a lot of things, and one of them is infodemic. So, what would be the best way to deal with the infodemic, especially now when we have a platform like Twitter, where journalists use it most of the time to disseminate news? We've seen most of the time news gets broken fast on Twitter, then it's verified later on mainstream media. What would be the best way to deal with infodemic, especially during this time when we spend so much time covering issues on COVID-19?
Well, I think, I mean, it's, you know, another one of those sort of almost imponderable questions, really. But the way that the BBC has dealt with all sources for news is you have to be able to match a source, unless it's one of your own correspondents. So, you know, if Reuters puts something out, you've got to match that with someone else putting it out. If it's on Twitter, it's absolutely no different. You need other sources to sort of to match a story up. I think we've been through an era of, you know, first for news. You've got to be first for news. You've got to be out there first, otherwise you're losing your audience. And I think we know now that that is fine up to a point. But there is one thing worse than being first for news, and that's being wrong for news. And if you're wrong for news once, twice, three times, you're not much good for news. And you have to believe in yourselves that your audience wants good, strong, authoritative, trustworthy news. So you simply have to recognize that if something breaks on Twitter, you want to know that you can stand that up before you believe it. It may be, if it's, let's say, I'll give you a simple example. If it's a Reuters news agency saying the Chinese premier says that he's put out sanctions against President Trump traveling anywhere in the world or something, you know, wow, what a story. Well, if Reuters are quoting the Chinese premier, it's probably true. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in Reuters that says they would enable that to go out without that being true. If Reuters put something out, or it was straight on Twitter saying, you know, Chinese premier says Trump won't be allowed to travel anywhere in Asia because they'll be trying to arrest him, you're going to want to check it. You're going to want to, you've just got to use your journalistic nous and don't be suckered into pushing something out too quickly. And whatever you do, attribute it.